Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, March 20th, 2026, and our dear friends, Larry Johnson and Col Wilkerson, are back with us. Welcome back.
Glad to be with
you. Good to be with you.
We survived another week.
Yeah, exactly. Today is a very special day. It's a new year. It's a new, as we call it in Iran, Nowruz is a new year in Iran, and other. The thing is that the last day of Ramadan is the Eid al-Fitr, when the fasting is just coming to an end, and it's important for Muslims, it's important for Iranians, and today is a good day, but unfortunately the war is
raging on.
Exactly. It's just making everything so difficult right now. And let me start, Larry, with you. Yesterday, we had Donald Trump talking about the current situation with the war against Iran. He said he was describing the current situation of the American army against Iran. Here is what he said. It was yesterday at 12 p.m., what he said.
Just about everything there is to obliterate, including leadership. The Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft equipment is gone. We're flying wherever we want, Pete. We have nobody even shooting at us.
And at 4 p.m. yesterday, we've learned that the Iranian air defense system hit F-35 fighter jet, and they have released this footage, and it's showing, which was reported by CNN. Then, do you believe, Larry, that Donald Trump is receiving false information? Because somehow it's some delusional, the way that he's talking about the battlefield. It seems that everything is done, they have nothing to fight back, or he's trying to make his case in order to show that how powerful he is, and he has total, dominance over what's going on.
Well, I'm not a physician. I did work as a respiratory therapy technician my way through high school. So I have some familiarity with medicine. Donald Trump is crazy. I mean, he's demented. This, what, and I don't say that as an insulting term. I mean that as a medical condition. He has exhibited confabulation over the course of the last, 15, 16 months while in office. Confabulation is when you say something that is objectively false, and yet you believe it's true. So it's not like, like he says, oh, we've obliterated the army. And they don't have any more Navy, they don't have any more Air Force. And then in the next breath, you say, but boy, we need the NATO navies to come with us to open the Strait of Hormuz, because essentially we can't do it ourselves. Well, wait a second. If they're obliterated, if they're 100% defeated, why, man, just go in and take over. It's done. It's over. So his brain is not even able to reconcile such glaring contradictions. What bothers me is that the press sits around and accepts this crap without pushing back and saying, hey, you can't keep saying one thing and meaning the other. I mean, it is, I feel like that, that opening scene from the movie Amadeus, when you're walking into the insane asylum and seeing all these crazy people to get to Salieri, who's also crazy. Trump is disconnected from reality and is dangerous, and nobody's tackling him and stopping him from doing it.
Let me pick up on what Larry just said in one aspect, and I agree with everything he just said. But that aspect is the journalist. Next door to me lives, and I won't name him, but lives a man who has the White House beat several times each 6-month period. He works for Al Jazeera. And I like him. He's a good guy. He debriefs me sometimes. But when he goes into the White House press pool, as it were, and is there sitting there asking questions, I want to ask him desperately. I haven't so far, but I want to because he's a friend. But I put this question to all those people. What's wrong with you? And you know what they'll tell you, because I've said that to 2 or 3, not him, but 2 or 3. And they say back, well, we'll get kicked out of the pool. So what? All of you get up and walk out. What do you think that would do to the press for the White House? Get up, all of you, and walk out. Every time he starts to lie, get up and walk out. Forget it. Don't give him any coverage. But you'll never get him to do that. Partly because at least a third of them are owned by Israel.
Colonel, but there is something deeper than that. It's not just about Donald Trump himself. We had Stephen Miller coming to Fox News just saying the same thing. And here is what Scott Bessent said, who's supposed to be some sort of, brain in the administration. Here is what he said.
Said Maria, for the regime, we're back to the stuff of Baghdad Bob here. The regime is in collapse, and the people are starting to turn against them. We're starting to see defections at Treasury. We now know where the Iranian leadership bank accounts are, and those are being frozen. And we will hold them and see who comes forward in terms of defections. But we're starting to see defections throughout the regime, and that's how this ends. So the idea of some tolling arrangement is ridiculous. What President Trump is talking about, and to be clear, he has focused on Kharg Island since 1988, before the Shah fell, that the U.S. should be focused on that. He is laser focused on it. As I said, there was a bombing campaign last week. The military assets on Kharg Island were destroyed. And the other thing I can tell you, if you're an oil worker, you don't want to work there. So all the oil workers there are being coerced to stay there. And, we will see what happens with whether that eventually becomes a U.S. asset.
He just used a previous comment that I'm not aware of, but I'm sure I know the general contents of it about Kharg Island that is, as he just presented it, a total lie. In 1988, Kharg Island was being attacked by Saddam Hussein because it was the end of the Iraq-Iran war, a bloody war. And we sortied forth to reflag Kuwaiti tankers, and you know that story. Didn't do too good a job even then when we had massive naval superiority in clearing the Gulf, because Bridgerton hit a mine right away. Samuel B. Roberts hit a mine and had to limp back to Norfolk at 4 knots. We had a real problem even then, and we were massively more powerful, especially Navy-wise then than we are now. And Saddam Hussein and the UAE too, because it started about 66 and it had been pressed by a number of countries in the region for a long time. Granted, they don't have the capability we do, but they never could get it and get at it and do anything really bad to it. Now, if we're going to go do something bad to it, Nima, this is about a third the size of Manhattan. It's called the Forbidden Isle in Persian terms. It is absolutely pristine in terms of the depth of the water and everything, unlike any other place in the Gulf. It can refuel fuel at the same time 10 super tankers. So it's absolutely essential. You take that full facility out, Putin will go from 150 million a day to 300 million a day. And the price of oil will go up significantly too. And we know that. So Bessent's lying through his teeth if he says we are going to get on there with whatever ground troops. I fear for those Marines, half of their Ospreys will crash en route. But if we're going to get on there and destroy that, we got to think really hard about how we're going to replace the throughput capacity that represents for the world oil market. And that's true of all of this game we're playing with oil. Unless we've got the oil to replace all of that we're going to eliminate, and maybe for an extended period of time, if we take some place like Kharg Island and destroy the facilities there. Of course, you can't just, you got to destroy the pipes coming into it too. We're playing with a global chaos. And we've already started that, so why am I even saying that? Trump doesn't have any idea what he's doing.
Larry, your understanding, because they're sending Marines, they're sending forces, it seems that they're sending to the Khark Island. I don't know any other place that they're not going to be able to get close to the Strait of Hormuz. That's why many people are somehow supposing that they're going to attack the Khark Island. Netanyahu yesterday was talking the same way, that he said the ground invasion would be, inevitable. And it seems that Israelis are advocating for that as well. It's not just about the Trump administration. What do you make of it?
I don't even know what they mean by a ground invasion. So let's start with Khark Island. And Colonel Wilkerson mentioned the possibility of Marines flying there in Ospreys. Well, the MEU, the Marine Expeditionary Unit that's en route with 2,200 Marines, let's just do the math. An Osprey can carry 24 Marines with combat loads. Okay, let's see.
If it flies.
Yeah, if it flies. So let's see that if we got 10 Osprey, that's 240. That's only basically 1/10 of it. And, maybe they're going to have to make, so maybe if we had 100 Osprey, which we don't, you could have them all fly at once. So, number one, the Marines can't get to Khark without running the gauntlet in the Strait of Hormuz, which means the ship would be sunk. So the Marines won't get there that way. But what I am hearing is the likelihood that they're going to try to land them somewhere right around the strait on Iranian shore. Now, the MEU comes equipped. They can last 15 days in theory without being resupplied. But that's assuming sort of optimal conditions, that they're not facing missile fire, drone fire, etc. This, again, you're going to plan a military operation to be able to accomplish certain objectives. Now, what might that objective be? To secure the shore of Iran that's right there on the Gulf? Well, sorry, that's hundreds of miles long. 2,200 Marines don't cover a shoreline that's hundreds of miles long. And it's not like there's just one specific location where Iran has its missiles hidden in caves and guns that are capable, artillery pieces capable of firing into the Gulf, and not to mention the underwater drones, the submarines. I mean, Iran has a large array of options, so it's not even clear what the military mission is now. So I also have speculated that maybe they're going to use the Marines as a diversion while they try to launch a special operations unit to attack one of the hardened, deeply buried targets in hopes of recovering enriched uranium. That could be on the table, but I was specifically involved with that exercise 20 years ago, and at the hot wash, that after you do the exercise and you evaluate it, the lesson learned was don't do it. So I don't know if we've learned that lesson, but that was the conclusion that came out of that exercise. So this is I think people are making military decisions who don't understand a damn thing about military capabilities, logistics, and operations.
I couldn't agree with that more. When Ahmadinejad told me in New York City at the UNGA that Iran had 1,875 nautical miles of coastline on the Persian Gulf, and the United States none. So who was the culprit in terms of incidents at sea?
Yeah.
I went and got my maps out. Got them right there on the floor right now. Larry's right. About 1,000 of those miles are on the eastern side. By the way, that's where Parmenion brought his craft up in order to resupply Alexander the Great. Alexander almost died because Parmenion ran into such rough situation in the Gulf, even with his boats, that he couldn't supply Alexander. And that's very rough terrain, as Larry was insinuating. Where are you going to put these Marines ashore in a traditional amphibious landing? You know, where are you going to put them ashore? Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, on the wharfs, on the beach? They're going to be dead. And also the amphibious bottom, bringing them close enough to make an amphibious assault, is going to be dead. That little thing everybody's calling a carrier, it isn't a carrier. It's an amphibious assault ship. And it's got airplanes on it. And they can support the Marines going ashore. But where are they going to go? I've done the study, the analysis of this sort of thing for PACOM years ago, but we did it. We did it because we thought we were going to be fighting the Russians coming down from Afghanistan. We couldn't understand why they were in Afghanistan. We weren't doing the political business. We were just doing the military business. And we knew they wanted a warm water port. And so we were planning for fighting them in Iran, planning for them trying to come down vicinity Chabahar, Bandar Abbas, that area. I know that terrain. Good luck, Donald Trump. Good luck, Marines.
Yeah.
Larry, the escalation is coming to the oil facilities, gas facilities. Yesterday, Iran has hit, in response to what Israel did to the South Pars, which one of the main, facilities in Iran. And they have responded, they have attacked Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, and Haifa. And the attack on Qatar just, kicked out 20% of their capacity of LNG. And Donald Trump's, what we've heard from the sources, from the Axios, Tom Barak, with Barak Ravid, he said that Americans and Israelis coordinated before this attack coming. And then Donald Trump came out, said he had nothing to do with what has happened. And what is the real story? Because we have seen this before with the attack on Doha. Donald Trump came out and said he didn't know about it. What is your understanding of that?
Yeah, both are true. That likely Trump was not asked and wasn't said, "Hey, we want your permission to do X, Y, and Z," because he's already signed off on the execute orders. So the Navy and Air Force have complete authority to act, unless they go against what the rules of engagement that were contained in that execute. But Barack is right that U.S. The Combined Air Operations Center, the CAOC, which used to be based at Al Udeid. I don't think it's still there simply because it's received so much fire from Iran that they've had to withdraw to another more secure location, perhaps Incirlik. But that CAOC monitors every single aircraft, or they used to when they had all the radars up, that takes off and lands. Right now, they do have they've got a sort of a workaround. They're using AWACS. So AWACS are in the air, providing some of the previous coverage that was provided by those ground radars that were destroyed. But the U.S. commanders absolutely knew where the Israelis were headed. And Iran had made it very clear, if you hit us here, we're going to hit you there. That will be tit for tat. And exactly what happened. And in blowing these up, this is extending the time that the world oil and liquid natural gas shortage and fertilizer shortage will be, that shortage is going to be extended. There's no any quick solution on the horizon. And I want to remind people of what bragging that Donald Trump did during the State of the Union address on the 24th of February. So this is just 4 days before he launched this attack on Iran. He said, gasoline, which reached a peak of over $6 a gallon in some states under my predecessor, it was quite honestly a disaster, is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states, and in some places $1.99 a gallon. And when I visited the great state of Iowa just a few weeks ago, I even saw $1.85 a gallon for gasoline, the lowest in 4 years and fallen fast. Well, that didn't age very well. I noticed where I live, at the start, February 28th, the gas price was $2.54. It is now up a full dollar, $3.54, and it's going to continue to rise. And Trump can't go back and pretend that he had nothing to do with this. This is all the result of his actions. And yet, once again, you don't see anybody in the press calling him out, holding him accountable, asking him the question that, hey, what happened to those low gas prices you were promising?
It's almost as if these people have no memory, as if they take no notes. They go back to their notes and look, and say, well, wait a minute, on the 28th, you said that. Very, very rarely does that happen. This is a complete and abject failure of what we call our mainstream media.
Colonel, when we look at the destruction that is happening in Iran and in Israel, it's somehow, they're comparable. But when it comes to Iran, we see the strategy is different. They didn't attack the oil facilities before Israel attacking them. And how do you see the escalation? Because if Donald Trump comes out and you cannot attack, the oil facilities, let's see what would be the next target of Israelis, other infrastructures. I don't know what they want to attack. And what would be the response from Iran? And are they going to attack desalination? Are they going to attack something that would be a great, problem, could bring some sort of catastrophe for the whole region?
I think the Iranians have been very circumspect. They don't attack specific targets that might be more to their disadvantage internationally, if you will, or even more crimes, until those targets are attacked in their country. And that's usually Israel. And they then respond in kind. I understand they've done some significant damage to Haifa's oil facilities, for example. And that was only after Israel made the attack. And I heard maybe 40 hours ago or so, someone from the administration, and then I read that Trump had actually said it. I didn't find it anywhere, but that wasn't known to him. We didn't know that Israel was going to attack the oil facilities. The implication being we would have said no, we would have stopped them had we known it. That to me is a contrived story too. Israel does whatever it wants to, whenever it wants to. But Iran has been, in my view, fairly circumspect in attacking targets that militarily significant, rather than like Netanyahu bombing everything in sight. And look at what he's doing in Lebanon right now. This is as unconscionable as the opening days of Gaza when he was killing everything in sight. He's killing everything in sight in Lebanon now, including taking out whole hotel floors, killing people in the street in Beirut. This guy's a bloodthirsty monster. And Trump's allied with him, tooth and nail allied with him.
Donald Trump, in his last, post on Truth Social, he said, without the United States, NATO is a paper tiger. They didn't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Now that fight is military. He's talking about militarily won. He's talking about that the United States won the war and with very little danger from them. And then he goes on and talking about the Strait of Hormuz and calling Europeans coward and because they're not joining the United States. And he's somehow begging for the help of Europeans. But after all, Larry, militarily, what do they have to bring to the table? Because Donald Trump is somehow feeling if they join, that would be the end.
Yeah. Well, apart from the fact that they have limited military capability, why do they need to bring anything to the table? It's over. He's won. I mean, again, this is the disconnect in the logic. If if you've really achieved this glorious victory that you claim to have achieved, then why do you need anybody else, man? Take the victory lap yourself. So it's just, it's just one further reminder of his detachment from reality and his inability to recognize that he's saying irrational things, enabled by a group of sycophants like Stephen Miller and Scott Bessent and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. God, it is a recipe for disaster. I don't know if we can point to another period in history where the leader of a nation has been so detached from reality and so, I guess, Adolf Hitler. Hitler is actually the last one to be this out of touch with what was actually happening on the ground militarily, and explaining and vocally expressing the fact that, we're winning, we're victorious. And I don't make the Hitler comparison lightly. I mean, sometimes that is so grossly overused. But my God, we're seeing right now the president of the United States making decisions based on either false information, or the truth is out there. He just ignores it. It pretends that he didn't hear that. And we saw that last year when Tulsi Gabbard initially said, no, Iran's not building a nuke. And when Trump was questioned about, your director of national intelligence said they're not building a nuke, he goes, I don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Right there. There you have it.
And what an embarrassment she was, especially under the very excellent questioning of John Ossoff of Georgia.
Yeah.
What an embarrassment she is. She doesn't even know the law. She doesn't even know that she's lying through her teeth, I'm sure through ignorance, that the president only makes these decisions and determines what's good intelligence and bad intelligence. That's a violation of everything that the 1947 National Security Act and amendments thereto since, including the amendment that established the DNI. It's a violation of everything. That she doesn't know her job. She doesn't know the position she's in, and she doesn't know the position Trump's in either. And one other thing, I imagine Kane has been telling some things to Hegseth, who has been maybe guardedly giving them to Trump. I don't know, but it may be just coming from the Pentagon. When we did the massive reorganization after we cut the military by about 25% in 1990, 91, 92, 93, and then a little bit afterwards, we shopped out many things. We had done it beforehand to an extent, but we really shopped them out after that. And what do I mean by that? I mean that mine countermeasures, subsea, surface, and air were shopped out to the Allies in Europe. Ice breaking was shopped out to the Allies in Europe. Every time we would do a coordinated joint exercise, combined exercise in this case, they would do those functions. And we would monitor those functions and say, yeah, that was good. Oh, no, you need to do this. You need to whatever. In other words, we did share with our allies things that we didn't want to spend much money on and didn't want to do, particularly because they weren't in our, shall we say, expertise. We didn't do them particularly well or whatever. And maybe the Norwegians did, maybe the Brits did, and so forth. I imagine there's some of that right now about mine countermeasures. And that's really what's got the Pentagon irritated about not having the allies participate, because they do have some very sophisticated mine countermeasure capabilities. Just one case in point. We have ships that were, most of them anyway, total wrecks in terms of what they were designed for. One of them even came off the ways built by Lockheed Martin and broke in half the minute it came off the slide and went in the water. We had to do something with those ships. We'd spent a lot of money on them, so we took a few of them and created minesweepers out of them. They're very awkward minesweepers. Some of them have, for example, metallic hulls. a minesweeper that's up to date has a laminated plastic hull. So, you don't become your own worst enemy while you're sweeping. So that may be behind some of this angst about the European allies. I don't think it would make any difference, even if they joined, because I think the Iranians have the upper hand. It is their ocean, it is their sea, it is their coastline, and they are quite well armed to protect that coastline. So I think it's a moot point, but that might be why Hegseth, at least, and Kane might be a little bit irritated at the allies.
Well, let me just add, we don't have any functioning minesweepers right now. Yeah, so we're out. The greatest military in the world is out of minesweepers.
And when we did this in 88 and 89, and believe me, some of that gear's still around, like the towed things that the helicopters bring through.
Right.
We had a real problem. We almost lost 2 of our own mine countermeasure ships because we screwed up. So it's not an expertise you maintain on a routine basis. You may practice it once a year, and your equipment's sort of the same way too. You don't really use it that much. And when you have allies who do it in the combined exercises, you don't have to.
Since you both mentioned Tulsi Gabbard, we remember when she was chosen by the Trump administration to be part of the administration. Everybody was somehow happy about Tulsi Gabbard, but she's just, the transformation of Tulsi Gabbard is just amazing. Being Democrats, then Republican, then coming, to the Trump team, and right now she's destroying each and every credit she had before. And here is what, Congressman Castro was asking him legitimate questions about the war against Iran. Here is what she said.
The death and destruction continues. The economic cost to the United States, to Israel, to the Gulf states, and to the world continues to increase. So I want to ask you, to the best of your knowledge, do you know whether Israel is supportive of the president's call to make a deal with Iran?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know Israel's position on that.
And to what do you attribute Israel's decision to strike Iranian energy infrastructure, despite President Trump's call to keep those facilities off limits?
I don't have an answer for that.
So they ignored the president. Do you agree with that?
I'm not privy to any of their deliberations or what went into their calculus in launching this or other attacks. We are not involved in the operational element of this. We're providing continuously on a daily basis the intelligence assessments of the events that are occurring. And
I guess I know the FBI can't because they're domestic, but can anybody else at the table provide any insight into that?
I guess I'm not sure what the question you're asking, Congressman Castro. I guess a couple of things. The goals that the president set out are clearly defined. The DNI related those. What was not included is a goal of the U.S.
Well, Director, let me start with this. Let me start with this question. You asked what my question is. Let me reclaim my time, Director. Come on. Do you know why Israel decided to strike that infrastructure despite the fact that the president said it should be off limits?
I wouldn't speak for Israel.
What do you guys know? We're at war. What do you guys know?
We'll have to take that for the record.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly say.
Go ahead.
And I don't want to go too far with this, but we knew through the NSA every single conversation virtually that was taking place during the war in Iraq. The second one. Well, probably the first one too, but I wasn't that close to it in the first one. I went to the freaking briefings in the second one. We knew what Germany was saying, what France was saying, what Israel was saying, what Saddam Hussein was saying, what Turkey was saying. Every day we knew, okay? So they're sitting there either unaware of the capacity and capabilities they have, or they're freaking lying. We spied on the Israelis all the time, and they on us.
Larry, what do you make of the position that Tulsi Gabbard is in right now? Because we have the head of, the director of counterterrorism, Joe Kent, resigning from his position because he doesn't agree with Donald Trump and the new policies toward the new war in the Middle East. And you see Tulsi Gabbard somehow trying to facilitate or trying to do whatever she can do to support Donald Trump. And you see Joe Kent. How do you see the fracture that is happening within the administration? Do you think that's going to happen again and again, or Joe Kent is going to be the first and the last one coming out of the administration?
Well, judging by how Joe is being treated, both by the media as well as many of his former colleagues, there's little incentive for anybody to want to come forward and be essentially a whistleblower, which is what he is. This is what he did is so rare. Go back to the first Gulf War, the second, the March 2003 attack on Iraq. Nobody resigned. Nobody stood up and said, no, we are attacking Iraq for no good reason.
Colonel Enright. Don't forget Colonel Enright.
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah. So, but it's rare. It's very rare. And Tulsi dishonored herself. She took an oath to the Constitution, not to Donald Trump, and she's betrayed that oath. And I don't know if it's because for money or the attention or just to join being in the powerful position, but she sits atop as the coordinator for all of the intelligence community in terms of producing intelligence for the president to make sure he's got the most accurate picture of what's going on. And instead of her being a truth teller, she's a political spinmeister. It's shameful.
Nima, let me just make one comment. I think I disagree a little bit with what Larry just said, and let me tell you why. I think we're going to see people, I don't know that Joe Kent is a leader of this sort of thing, for example, but I think we're going to see people like Vance, maybe even Rubio, and certainly a layer of people underneath them who are going to start abandoning ship because they know if they stay, they have no future whatsoever. And I'd put Vance at the top of that list. And I'd go back to Pence and say, regardless of what you think of Mike Pence, he at least had a viable political career and he had a career still to go. Murdered him being Trump's vice president in the first term. So I think some people, I don't know what Vance is going to do because he's trapped. In many ways, he's trapped.
Yeah.
He's probably thinking right now, God, why did I accept this position? Probably sending notes to Peter Thiel and saying, why did you mislead me? But there are going to be some people who are going to try to salvage their future prospects. It's going to be mostly young people and maybe in the second and third layer. But I think they're going to start leaving.
Yeah, I know that there was a meeting Monday night with Tulsi, Joe Kent, and J.D. Vance. And what was told to me was that they were using Kent as a way to try to wake Trump up. Now, if you noticed in Kent's conversation with Tucker Carlson, he was very careful to not attack Trump, to not, to speak very complimentary of Trump. Now that anybody that's read Schopenhauer knows that that's the technique and tactic you use when dealing with a corrupt narcissist. You you sort of flatter them and make it think that it's their idea. But even with, and what was the other thing that was fascinating out of the conversation was Kent, before he left, he had a one-on-one with Trump, had a conversation with Trump. And no matter what, and in that setting, Trump's very solicitous and he's kind. But, when Kent's not sitting there, Trump is just brutal and insulting. So, I'm hoping Colonel Wilkerson's correct, that there will be others who will follow. But, as we've seen with here's Joe Kent, and they're talking about the FBI investigating him for leaks. So everybody's got to sit down and weigh the cost. If I do this, sort of like Edward Norton, I got to get the hell out of the country. And not many are willing to make that sacrifice.
That was done to put the fear of God in future ones, that's for sure.
Yep.
Carl, we know that before the war happening, the Trump administration increased the defense budget to by $600 billion. And then lately, after, mostly a period of time of 3 weeks of this war with Iran, they come out with new budget, and they're talking about $200 billion more. And it's going to simply double the budget they had before. It was 900 plus 900. And here is what Pete Hegseth said about that.
In dollars, I think that number could move. Obviously, it takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future. Ensure that our ammunition everything's refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond. I mean, President Trump, as he said, rebuilt the military in his first term. Didn't think he'd use it as dynamically in his second, but he had. So thank goodness he did that. And an investment like this is meant to say, hey, we'll replace anything that was spent. And now that we're reviving our defense industrial base and rebuilding the arsenal of freedom and cutting deals like our great deputy secretary here is doing, long lead times on exquisite munitions, we're going to be refilled faster than anyone imagined. And I think, we're also still dealing with the environment that Joe Biden created. Which was depleting those stockholds and not sending them to our own military, but to Ukraine, which is every time we reach back and look at any sort of a challenge we have, it goes back to, send it to Ukraine. Ultimately, we think this should be these munitions are better spent in our own interests at this point, and this kind of funding bill is going to ensure that we're properly funded going forward.
Yeah, there are reports that the United States is burning through cruise missiles. Carl, your understanding?
There were so many lies in that, I don't know where to start. The last one, of course, about Biden. Biden actually did something to plus up some of the more critical categories of munitions that we were not watching very closely. And it didn't all go to Ukraine. Wouldn't have anything right now if it did. And what Pete Hegseth has done in 14, 15 months is probably infinitesimal in terms of the long lead time you need to do these things. So it's just full of lies. A $200 billion supplemental only makes sense because I know what we do in the Pentagon when we start any kind of kinetic activity. The first thing you do is put that supplemental over there, even if you don't need it. And I'll tell you right now, they cannot spend the money they've got right now fruitfully. It is so bad that much of the money is being lost to what I'll call the poisonous ways that they have to distribute the money in the rapidity they have to distribute it in order to make sure that it doesn't go away. It's kind of like running out at the end, and you just put everything in. They are spending money on things right now that are not going to prove very effective and probably are going to prove just full of graft and stealing because they're going so rapidly. And they, not Biden, they have disassembled all the checks and balances in the Pentagon, ostensibly and allegedly because he wants things to move fast. He wants, as he puts it, the technology to get into the field before it's obsolete. Well, that's a nice thing to say, but when you eliminate testing, evaluation, analysis, oversight and everything else, guess what the contractors are going to do to you? What they've done since time immemorial: rip your ass off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's just lying. He's lying through his teeth.
Well, the other thing he's also ignoring is because of Trump's brilliant trade strategy. The Chinese have cut off the supply of rare earth minerals and gallium, which are critical components in many of the weapon systems and supporting systems like radars. Notice that they have yet to be able to build and install the radars in the nose cone of the F-35s because of the lack of those materials out of China. And those aren't going to show up anytime soon. So no matter, let's just assume that you could actually build a factory that was automated that could produce, say, PAC-3 missiles by, turn them out 100 a day as opposed to 100 every 2 months. They still wouldn't be able to do it because they don't have some of the critical raw materials because China's holding them back.
And if you know anything about defense production in wartime, Neiman, you know that you got to go minimum to 2 shifts. And if you're really going balls to the wall, you got 3 shifts, 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day. Where are you going to get the workforce? Where are you going to get the skilled workforce? Because more and more these weapons take a skilled workforce, even if it's mostly automated. Take the Tomahawk production line, for example. One of the reasons they couldn't increase Tomahawk for the Navy was because they didn't have the skilled workers to do it. And look at our submarine fleet. Our submarine fleet is now so far behind on both classes, ballistic missile and attack, that by law, the program should be canceled. Congress says if this happens, cancel the program. Well, it's happened in both the Columbia and I forget the class for the attack, Virginia class or something like that. But in both of those classes, they both should be canceled. The only reason they're not is because they're utterly essential to our defense and our security. And they know that in the contracting business. But one of the reasons is we don't have a workforce. We couldn't go to 3 shifts. We couldn't go to 2 shifts. We don't have the workforce.
Larry, does it mean that the United States has to produce everything for the United States and for Israel? And Israel, what do we know about the capabilities of Israel providing, cruise missiles, whatever they need for their fighter jets?
Well, Israel has its own production facilities for, I think, the missiles used in David Sling and in their Iron Dome. but those are not, particularly those air defense systems aren't designed to take out the ballistic missiles, which Iran is using. And similarly, they are not industrially equipped to produce on the scale that, say, China does. So this is much, I would argue that much of the military industrial infrastructure in the United States and in Israel is really designed for 20th century warfare, not designed for 21st century warfare. And what I mean by that is, in a way, it's like Back to the Future. In 1941, 42, when the U.S. industrial plants started pushing out massive quantities of planes and jeeps and tanks, rapidly building ships, they at least had the infrastructure and the materials needed in order to produce those items. We're still sort of geared on that model, except we don't have the supply chains and we don't have the working force, and also the incentives that are built into some of these contracts. Lockheed Martin found they could make more money by having PAC-3 missiles built by hand as opposed by robot.
Yeah.
So when your defense industry, and this is what really separates the Russian and Chinese defense industries from that of the West, though they are not, the Chinese and Russian systems are not profit driven. They are not subject to shareholders who want to make more money. And they are, in fact, beholden to the government to meet what the government says are the needed, what are the requirements, what they need to fight on the battlefield. And in the case of, this is why that the U.S. defense budget is at least twice the size of the defense budget that Russia and China combined have.
Yep.
I mean, just think about this. It's ridiculous. So the for-profit system actually ends up undermining our ability to defend ourselves.
And the grifters in the system are parcel of it.
Yeah.
I mean, China gets, I read an analysis recently that I think is fairly accurate. China gets about 2.5 times bang for its buck as we do. And I don't know but the answer to this, Larry. Maybe you do. Are Israel's production facilities underground?
No. I think they're mostly above ground.
So they may be taking a pounding too.
Yeah. Well, no, they've been hit. And again, it goes back to the arrogance, because they assume that their Iron Dome and their David Sling would be so effective that Iran couldn't touch them. And now they discovered last June that they could be touched, and you can't move everything underground in that short period of time.
Yeah. Carl, here is what the NATO Secretary General said about helping the United States in the war.
Ruta.
Contacts with allies all over NATO territory. What I'm sensing and hearing is that we all agree, as we always did, that it was crucial for Iran not to get its hands on a nuclear capability, a ballistic missile capability, and what the US is doing at the moment is degrading that capability of Iran, and I think that's very important. This is important for European security, for the Middle East. It is vital for Israel itself. Then when it comes to the Hormuz Strait, everybody agrees. This strait cannot stay closed. It has to open up again as soon as possible. This is crucial for world economy. In my context with allies are seeing is that they are intensely discussing amongst each other, with the United States and amongst each other, the best way forward to tackle this huge security issue. And let me add to that, that I'm confident that allies, as always, will do everything in support of our shared interest.
Yeah. I'm not confident. I'm not the least bit confident. I don't think he speaks for Macron and Starmer and Merz and a host of other leaders. I just don't think he does. That has always been, I don't know that he realizes he's demonstrating it, but that has always been our principal objection to NATO. They talk. Whether you go back to Serbia, you go back to some of the other little conflicts that we've had since World War II, and it's always talk, but it's very seldom action. So generally what you get is you get us peeling out a country here, and making a, what did Donald Rumsfeld call them? Coalition of the willing. Because you can't ever get the alliance. It's not threatened sufficiently to wake it up to a real threat. And Iran's not a real threat. Why should they wake up to it? I mean, maybe the Strait of Hormuz being closed is a significant threat, but who did that?
Right.
Larry, Iran is defining a new sort of mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz. And that's going to be for the years to come. It's not just for the time being. And how do you see they're talking about the strait is closed. It's not closed. The strait is open, and but they're selecting who can use it, who can pass through the strait. They had Chinese, Indian, Iraqi, and even Malaysian tankers, passing through, but none from the Europe and from the United States or other countries. And how do you see the Strait of Hormuz being one of the main reasons for the whole countries, for all of these countries in the Middle East to come together and define a new security architecture for the region without the United States?
Well, let's go back to what Joe Kent said in his interview with Tucker, because I was struck by it. He suggested that one of the conditions that Iran would have to agree to if this war is ended in a negotiated settlement is that all future purchases of oil will be in U.S. dollars, the petrodollar. So Kent even understood that, part of what is driving this war, part of what was driving the U.S. to attack Iran is to try to destroy BRICS and try to disrupt the economic restructuring that's taking place in the world right now. So what is Iran doing? They're in business now with China. I like, we should play as background music, the song "Taking Care of Business Every Day," because the Iranians are saying, "Hey, Pakistan, you want that oil to come out? Sure, pay for it in yuan. You give us, we get 10%, and you're free to go." Same for India. Everybody's got to pay in yuan, and apparently Xi Jinping just announced within the last day or two that he would like actually to see the yuan become an international reserve currency.
Yes.
Boy.
Wrote it in a manifesto.
Yeah. So now we know what this is, the battle of the Titans. The city of London with the United States trying to preserve the primacy of the dollar, and the Russians and the Chinese, now the Iranians, doing everything they can to destroy the primacy of the dollar.
Which brings me to a comment I made yesterday and will continue to make. I think the powers behind the throne are really engaged with that objective with regard to this war. They want to stop China.
Colonel, here is what Scott Bessent said about this situation of the Strait of Hormuz and the consequences of that.
A break the glass plan across the administration and at Treasury. We unsanctioned Russian oil. We knew that there were about 130 million barrels on the water, and we created supply that is beyond the Straits of Hormuz. So we anticipated this. We knew that there could be a temporary, and I want to emphasize temporary, choke point there, and there was 130 million barrels of floating storage. In the coming days, we may unsanction the Iranian oil that's on the water. It's about 140 million barrels. So depending on how you count it, that's 10 days to 2 weeks of supply that the Iranians had been pushing out. That would have all gone to China. In essence, we will be using the Iranian barrels against the Iranians to keep the price down for the next 10 or 14 days as we continue this campaign.
Let's see you do that, Scott. That'd be my first comment. My second comment would be, okay, Putin's up to 150 million a day windfall profits now, probably 200 million before the month is out. And you're doing all this on the high seas. You want a global war? You want to start a world war? Keep on. I understand that we now finally have, the Russians grew some cojones. We finally have a tanker headed for Havana. At least that's where people whom I talk to about this think it's headed. And it's got enough to relieve some of the real problems in Cuba right now. Going to be really interesting to see what Donald Trump does when he finds out, if he hasn't already, that this is the case. If it is, we could stumble into a global conflict very easily here.
Yeah, I don't know how prepared is that. Are they? Because it seems that they were not prepared for the war with Iran to be continued to be somehow to drag on. And right now,
you remember how that video about 3 days ago of Scott Bessent being interrupted and having to go off stage and then coming back, and he was contacted by the president off stage. I don't know if the president was in the wings or if he just called him or whatever, but unprecedented. He had to get up in the middle of his talk and go off stage. And when he came back, he was visibly shaken. I think that's because the president told him he just got off the phone with Putin and lifted some of the sanctions, because that was Scott Besant's pet pig, with sanctions on Russia. So this is changing everything that they were doing, and they're playing a pickup game with the world as at stake in order to deal with it. And oh, by the way, why was our strategic petroleum reserve allowed to go below 500 million barrels down to 415 million on Trump's watch, when Trump had said during the campaign that he would make sure it was topped off and plus that? And he's tapped it again. So we're creating some problems, big problems for the world and for ourselves. And we're courting not just the renminbi taking over the dollar's role in the global economy. We're courting a war with China, not over Taiwan, not in the South China Sea. We're courting a war that would start probably with submarines all around the world. And by the way, China and Russia together match us or overmatch us in terms of both nuclear submarines, effective torpedoes, quiet, silent diesel submarines. Someone said to me the other day, how could they send a diesel submarine? I said, dude, you ever looked at our campaigns in the Pacific where we left Pearl and went to the Straits of Formosa, now the Taiwan Straits, and sank Japanese shipping and came back? Those were diesel electric, dude. They have long legs. By the way, we don't have any of those. Not a single one.
Larry, is Donald Trump empowering BRICS from within?
To an extent, but they've also had some success in trying to weaken BRICS, or at least success early on. And I think that's reversing. I know our good friend Pepe Escobar has been, somewhat in despair over the behavior of India. But, India really painted itself into a corner. Yeah. The Modi's effort to go out and side with the Israelis, and really, and a lot of that what's driving Modi is just anti-Muslim prejudice. So he caters to the Hindu view, and hates the Muslims. But it's now at a huge cost, not just political cost, economic cost. But so oil that India was buying from Russia at $55 a barrel, that's gone. It's now paying at least $90 a barrel. So its energy costs have doubled, which means the inflation rate in India is going to go through the roof. I mean, inflation, global inflation is going to be a reality for everybody, with the exception, well, even in Russia, but it's not going to hurt Russia because, as Colonel Wilkerson said, they're rolling in dough. This is, Putin is the big winner out of this whole misadventure by the West, because they control oil, they control liquid natural gas, they control major quantities of it, as well as fertilizer. They are the largest. Were and are the largest producer of fertilizer. Now, they're the only girl at the Sadie Hawkins dance.
Yeah,
they get to choose who they want to dance with and who they don't want to dance with, and the rest of the world is lined up like said, "Oh, please let me be your partner," except Europe so far. But the time's coming that Europe's going to have to cave on that. You saw how quickly Trump. And they caved on this notion of we're going to use sanctions. We're sanctioning Russia. We're sanctioning Iran. And they even said, yeah, we're going to lift the sanctions on Iran so they can sell oil. So this isn't about some deep-seated, we got to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, or we got to stop Iran from killing its protesters. Bullshit. This is about money. And the U.S. wants to control it, and it's losing control of it. That's what this whole thing is ultimately all about.
Bingo. And Europe just bought the entire complement of Russian Arctic LNG. The entire complement. They passed a law in 2022. They passed a law, but it wouldn't go into effect for 5 years. January 27th is when it goes into effect. and they just violated the spirit of that law anyway. And she said, it was what's her name? She said, "Well, in January we'll stop buying it." Right, in a pig's ass, you will.
Well, I wonder, if Russia's going to declare force majeure and say, "No, we're not going to sell to you. We got these other people we need to service," because they just, the friggin' Europeans just they seized another Russian tanker in the Mediterranean, and I don't see the Russians sitting back and saying, "Oh well, no big deal." I think they're going to make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, so do I. I think we have a prospect on the high seas, at a minimum, of widening this war seriously.
Larry, you, Colonel, and I were talking about the case of Charlie Kirk, various sessions we had talking about what has happened. Finally, we have someone who has some sort of information, who knows better, which is Joe Kent. He had an interview with Tucker Carlson. He somehow addressed what has happened, and with the case of Charlie Kirk. Here is what he said.
Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway. And I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space. And he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran." Very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that, it's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to have turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
no, I don't think you are.
Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran.
Yeah. Hey, look. The first American politician that Israel participated in the assassination of was John F. Kennedy. Israel attacked the USS Liberty, and there is compelling circumstantial evidence that people connected with Israel and working with others, perhaps the French as well, killed Charlie Kirk. So this is, the notion that this Tyler Robinson was, quote, the lone gunman, please. The rifle that he was alleged to have used would have torn Charlie's head off. The neck would have, if that had been fired from that rifle, the neck would have fully exploded. The head would have been separated from the body. So this was something. This was an unusual round that was shot. Which suggests something very, a sophisticated assassination attempt. And just one other point that, again, people don't think this through operationally. How do you do something? If you're going to take a shot at 140 yards, you've got to make sure that your rifle is zeroed, number one. Number two, how do you know where to take the shot from? Because it wasn't... this kid, Tyler Robinson, supposedly had never been to this campus before. So we're supposed to believe that he just walked around and said, oh, that spot looks good. And he climbed up there and figured out that his best way to escape was to run and jump off the roof. No. These things, you do surveillance beforehand, you do reconnaissance beforehand, and you put a plan together. How do you get in there? What do you need to do to make sure you can get a weapon into a particular position? How do you get away? What's the escape plan? Robinson had none of those capabilities of planning. This was a sophisticated operation, one that Israel is quite capable of.
And I'd say the only thing they haven't done that would be similar to the JFK assassination is they haven't had a Jack Ruby walk into the jail cell and kill Robinson.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up this session, yesterday Netanyahu said something about Jesus and comparing Jesus to Genghis Khan, and it was so much, the repercussions are just blowing, is just exploding out there. But here is what he said, and many people are criticizing Netanyahu because these sort of comments are not, good after all. But he's making these comments. Let's look at what he said.
Unfortunately and unhappily, Jesus Christ has no advantage over Genghis Khan. Because if you are strong enough, ruthless enough, powerful enough, evil will overcome good. Aggression will overcome moderation.
Oh, he's living testimony to the truth of that. Bibi is.
Yeah, so just when you think the guy's smart, for him to say something that abjectly stupid and offensive to Christians, but we know that these Jews in Israel, the Zionists, they hate Christians, and any Jew, because Jesus was a Jew, any Jew that converts to Christianity and tries to return to Israel as supposedly the right of return of Jews, they're not allowed. They're prohibited because they're no longer considered a Jew. They're a Christian. So this animosity towards Christians, and then you get these idiots within the Christian community who claim to be Christians, but they're Christian Zionists. Jesus' message was quite simple on several fronts. He overcame evil with good. He rose from the dead. All the evil that was done to him to try to destroy him couldn't, they say, can't keep a good man down. They couldn't keep a good man in the tomb. And the resurrection of Jesus was one that said no longer was salvation only to one special group of people who claimed that we're the special chosen ones of God. No, Jesus came out and said, you know what? Salvation is for everyone.
And Bibi Netanyahu has no idea what the Genghis Khan would have done or said if he met Jesus Christ. After all, Constantine let him take over his empire.
Thank you so much, Carl and Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Let's hope we have a peaceful weekend of sorts. But I'm afraid this thing is going to continue to escalate out of control.
Yeah, exactly.
Ditto.
Yeah. See you soon. Thank you.
All right, my friend.
Take care.
Behave yourself.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Keep Brazil safe.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.